The wind screamed across the ice fields of Arcturus Prime like a living thing. Jake Morrison pulled his thermal coat tighter and checked his scanner one more time. The temperature read minus 190 degrees. Another perfect day in paradise, he thought with a bitter smile. Jake had been working on this frozen rock for 3 years now. He was the construction foreman for the deep mining project, the man responsible for building humanity's newest mineral extraction facility. The work was hard and the conditions were brutal, but the pay was good and Jake liked being far from Earth's crowded cities. His crew of 40 workers lived in heated pods connected by insulated tunnels. They drilled into the ice, set up equipment, and slowly carved out a functioning base in one of the most hostile places humans had ever tried to settle. Every day was a fight against the cold, the wind, and the endless white nothing that stretched in all directions. Today, Jake was doing a routine perimeter check. The scanners had picked up some strange readings near the eastern ridge, about 5 miles from the main camp. Probably just ice shifting or equipment malfunction, but he had learned long ago to check everything personally. Lazy Foreman got people killed. He rode his hover sled across the frozen wasteland following the GPS markers. The sky above was a pale gray, the sun nothing more than a dim spot behind thick clouds. This planet had 2 suns, but both were far away and provided little warmth. Without the thermal suits and heating equipment, a human would freeze solid in less than 10 minutes. The eastern ridge came into view, a jagged line of ice cliffs rising about 200 feet above the plains. Jake slowed his sled and checked his scanner again. The readings were definitely odd. There was a heat signature down there, faint but present. That made no sense. Nothing on this planet generated heat except human equipment. He parked the sled and walked carefully toward the cliff face. His boots crunched on the packed snow. The wind had died down a bit, which was unusual. Jake looked around and saw something that made him stop. Tracks. Large ones, they weren't human. They weren't from any vehicle he recognized. The prints were roughly circular, about 2 feet across, with what looked like claw marks at the edges. Whatever made them was heavy and walked on 4 legs. Jake's hand moved to the plasma pistol on his belt. The Galactic Council had assured Earth that Arcturus Prime had no native life forms. The planet was dead, frozen solid for millions of years. But these tracks were fresh, maybe only a few hours old. He followed them along the base of the cliff until he found a cave entrance. It was partially hidden by ice formations, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. The tracks led inside. Jake pulled out his flashlight and drew his pistol. The cave was deeper than he expected. The walls were smooth ice, glowing faintly blue in his flashlight beam. The temperature inside was slightly warmer than outside, maybe minus 150. Still cold enough to kill, but noticeably different. Jake heard something up ahead, a sound like breathing, slow and labored. He moved forward carefully, every sense alert. The cave opened into a larger chamber, and that's when he saw them. They looked like dragons from old Earth stories. Reptilian bodies covered in scales that shimmered between blue and silver. Long necks, powerful legs, tails that curled around their bodies. But these weren't the fierce creatures of legends. They were huddled together in a pathetic heap, barely moving. The largest one, clearly an adult, raised her head as Jake entered. Her eyes were golden and intelligent, filled with pain and desperation. 3 smaller ones, children maybe, pressed against her sides. They were all shivering, their scales dull and lifeless. Jake had seen dying things before. These creatures were close to the end. The adult made a sound, low and musical, almost like speech. Jake's universal translator crackled to life on his collar. The device struggled with the language but managed to produce words. "Please," the translator said in a flat mechanical voice. "Help, children dying, cold, so cold." Jake stood frozen, his mind racing. He knew what these creatures were. Everyone in the galaxy knew. Draken, the warrior race. The species that had conquered half the known galaxy 200 years ago. They were feared, hated, and hunted. The Galactic Council had strict laws about contact with Draken refugees. But looking at this mother and her children, Jake didn't see warriors. He saw a family freezing to death. "How did you get here?" Jake asked, keeping his distance. The translator worked slowly. "Ship crashed. 3 weeks. Rest of clan dead. Tried to survive. Can't. Too cold. We are cold-blooded. Need heat. Any heat." The adult Draken, the mother, lifted one of her front legs. Jake saw a nasty wound there. Partially frozen, definitely infected. She had been trying to hunt, probably, or gather something edible. On this planet there was nothing. "Please," the mother said again. Not for me, for them. They are innocent. They have done nothing wrong. Jake looked at the three young ones. They were small, probably equivalent to human children around 5 or 6 years old. Their eyes were half closed, their breathing shallow. Another day, maybe 2, and they would be dead. He should walk away. The law was clear. Draken were dangerous. Harboring them was a serious crime. He could lose his job, go to prison, maybe even face execution depending on how strictly the council wanted to enforce their rules. But Jake had a daughter back on Earth. She was grown now, living her own life, but he remembered holding her as a baby. He remembered the fierce protective love that had filled him then. Looking at this Draken mother, he saw that same love in her golden eyes. "What's your name?" Jake asked. "Sarah," the translator replied. "I'm Jake. Jake Morrison." He holstered his pistol and knelt down, still keeping a safe distance. "I'm going to help you, Sarah, but you need to trust me and do exactly what I say." The mother's eyes widened. "You will help? Why, humans fear us, hate us." "Maybe," Jake said, "but I've never been good at following rules that don't make sense." "Can you walk?" "I will try. For my children, I will do anything." Jake activated his comm unit. "This is Morrison. I need the emergency medical sled sent to my location immediately, and prep the old storage facility in Sector 7. I need it heated to 200 degrees within the hour." "Boss, that's way too hot for humans," Ryan Cooper's voice came back. "What's going on?" "I'll explain when I get back. Just do it, and Ryan, this stays quiet. Tell only people you absolutely trust." There was a pause. Ryan had worked with Jake for 2 years. He knew when to ask questions and when to just follow orders. "Understood, boss. Sled is on the way." Jake looked back at Sarah and her children. "Can you and the little ones hold on for another hour?" "We will try." "Good." Jake stood up and started removing his thermal coat. "Here, wrap this around the smallest one. It'll help a bit." Sarah's eyes filled with something Jake recognized as gratitude. "Thank you, human Jake. Why do you do this? You risk much." Jake thought about his answer. Why was he doing this? Breaking the law? Risking everything for creatures he had been taught to fear? "Because it's the right thing to do," he finally said. "And because I'm human. We're stubborn that way." The medical sled arrived 20 minutes later. Jake helped Sarah and her children onto the heated platform, covering them with emergency thermal blankets. The young ones were barely conscious, their scales frost-covered and dull. Sarah herself could barely stand, but she refused to rest until her children were secure. The ride back to the mining camp was tense. Jake drove the sled himself, pushing it faster than was probably safe. Behind him, he could hear Sarah making soft sounds to her children, comforting them in her native language. The translator couldn't handle those sounds, but their meaning was universal. Ryan Cooper was waiting at the entrance to Sector 7 when they arrived. His eyes went wide when he saw what Jake had brought back. "Boss, are those what I think they are?" "Draken. A mother and 3 kids. They need heat and medical attention. Jake, we can't do this. The council laws are very clear about this species. If we get caught, we're all going to prison, or worse." Jake stopped the sled and looked at his assistant Foreman. Ryan was a good man, cautious but loyal. They had been through tough times together, survived equipment failures and cave-ins. Jake trusted him. "Look at them, Ryan, really look. Do they look dangerous to you?" Ryan stared at the Draken family. Sarah met his eyes, her expression weary but dignified. The children were shivering despite the thermal blankets. One of them made a small sound, almost like a whimper. Ryan's face softened. "Damn it, Jake. You're going to get us all killed with that big heart of yours." "Is the storage facility ready?" 200 degrees and climbing. "I told the crew it's for a new type of equipment test, but some of them are going to figure it out. Then we tell them the truth, but only the ones we trust completely." They moved the Draken family into the storage facility. The space was large, originally meant for mining equipment before the project changed plans. Jake had converted it months ago into a backup shelter, installing heating units and basic life support. Now it would serve a very different purpose. The warmth hit Sarah and her children immediately. Jake watched as color began returning to their scales, the dull blue-silver brightening to something more vivid. The young ones stirred, their breathing becoming stronger. "The heat helps fast," Jake observed. Sarah nodded slowly. "We are cold-blooded. Heat is life for us. Without it, we shut down slowly. It is a painful death." Lisa Martinez arrived 10 minutes later. She was the camp's medical technician. trained to handle human injuries and basic alien physiology. Her jaw dropped when she saw the Draken. "Jake, please tell me you have a good explanation for this." "They were dying. I couldn't leave them." Lisa set down her medical kit and approached carefully. "I've never treated a Draken before. I'm not even sure where to start." "Start with the mother. She has a wound on her front left leg." For the next 2 hours, Lisa worked on Sarah while Jake stayed close. The Draken mother was patient, explaining through the translator what she could about her species' biology. Cold-blooded, heavily scaled, with a metabolism that required both heat and high-protein food. The wound was infected with some kind of ice bacteria, but Lisa's broad-spectrum antibiotics seemed to help. The children, whose names were Crix, Mira, and Little Finn, slowly recovered as they absorbed the warmth. They were curious despite their weakness, watching the humans with bright golden eyes. Finn, the youngest, even tried to touch Lisa's medical scanner, fascinated by the blinking lights. "They're just kids," Lisa said quietly. "Scared kids in a bad situation." That's what I thought too. By evening, word had spread through the mining camp. The crew was small enough that secrets didn't last long. Jake called a meeting in the main common room, leaving Ryan to watch over the Draken family. 38 workers packed into the space. They were a mixed group, men and women from a dozen Earth nations, plus a few from the moon colonies and Mars. All of them looked at Jake with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I'm not going to lie to you," Jake began. "I found a Draken family today, a mother and 3 children. They were dying from the cold. I brought them here." The room erupted in noise. Some people shouted in anger, others in fear. A few remained silent, waiting to hear more. Ben Hayes, the head geologist, stood up. "Jake, I respect you, but this is insane. Draken are warriors. They're dangerous. The council has protocols for a reason. Have any of you actually met a Draken?" Jake asked. "Or do you just know the stories?" Silence, that's what I thought. Yes, the Draken Empire was aggressive. They conquered a lot of worlds. But that was 200 years ago. Their civilization collapsed. Disease, war, environmental disasters. Now they're refugees scattered across the galaxy, and nobody wants them because everyone remembers what they used to be. "That doesn't make them safe," someone called out. "I watched a mother try to comfort her dying children today," Jake said, his voice hard. "I saw her offer me information about her own biology so we could save her kids first before treating her. That's not a warrior. That's a parent. Something every one of us can understand." "What about the law?" another worker asked. "The council will shut us down if they find out." "Maybe. But I'm not asking any of you to break the law. This is on me. If the council comes, I'll take full responsibility. But I need your help to keep them alive until I can figure out a permanent solution." Lisa spoke up from the back. "I've spent 2 hours with them. The mother, Sarah, is intelligent and grateful. The kids are just kids. Scared, confused, but not aggressive. I think we should help them." "Me too," Ryan said, surprising everyone. "I was against it at first. But after seeing them talking to Sarah, I can't just let them die. That's not what humans do." The debate went on for another hour. Some workers remained opposed, afraid of the consequences. But slowly the majority shifted toward helping. Jake's reputation carried weight. He had saved lives, fought for better working conditions, and never asked his crew to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Finally, they took a vote. 29 in favor of helping, 9 against. The 9 who voted no were given the option to request transfers to other facilities with no questions asked. 2 took the offer. The other 7 agreed to stay quiet if they didn't have to interact with the Draken directly. "Fair enough," Jake said. "Those who want to help, meet me in Sector 7 tomorrow morning. We've got work to do." That night, Jake sat with Sarah in the storage facility while her children slept. The warmth had revived them remarkably. They would survive now, at least in the short term. "You have risked much for us," Sarah said. "Your own kind fears the consequences. Some of them. But most are good people. They just needed to see past the stories. Why do humans do this? Help strangers? Risk everything for those not of your tribe?" Jake thought about that. "I guess because we've been the strangers before. Humans spent a long time fighting each other over stupid things like skin color or where we were born. We nearly destroyed ourselves. When we finally got to space and met other species, we learned something important. Life is hard everywhere. Survival is hard. If we don't help each other, then what's the point?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. The Draken Empire did not think this way. We took what we wanted. We believed strength was everything. Now we pay the price for that arrogance. The past is the past. What matters is what you do now. I want my children to have a future, a real one, not just survival. Is that possible? Jake looked at the 3 young Drakens sleeping peacefully in the warmth. Crix, the oldest, had his tail curled protectively around his younger siblings. They looked almost peaceful. I'm going to make sure it's possible, Jake said, but I'll need your help. This isn't just about keeping you warm and fed. I want to give you the tools to make your own way. Can you learn? Can your people adapt? Sarah's golden eyes gleamed. Draken are warriors, yes. But we were also builders once, engineers, scientists. That knowledge still exists in us. We simply forgot it when conquest became easier than creation. Then it's time to remember. Because I'm not just giving you shelter, Sarah. I'm going to give you fire. The knowledge to survive on your own. That's the real gift. Why? Because that's what my species does best. We're stubborn, we're creative, and we never give up. And we're about to teach you to be the same way. The next morning, Jake started what he privately called Operation Fire. It wasn't enough to keep Sarah and her family alive. He needed to give them independence, knowledge, and skills. If the council came and forced them to leave, at least they would have the tools to survive elsewhere. He started with the basics. Jake brought Sarah to the workshop where the crew maintained their equipment. The Draken mother walked slowly, still recovering from her injuries, but her golden eyes were sharp and curious. This is where we fix things, Jake explained. Everything on this planet tries to kill us. The cold breaks machinery. Ice gets into joints. Metal becomes brittle. So we have to maintain and repair constantly. If we couldn't do this, we'd all be dead in a month. Sarah looked around the workshop. Tools hung on walls organized by type. Workbenches held partially disassembled equipment. A large heating unit kept the space warm enough for humans to work without thick gloves. You build things, Sarah said, like Draken did long ago. Exactly, and I'm going to teach you how to build again. Jake started with hand tools, how to use a wrench, how to solder metal, how to read technical diagrams. Sarah learned quickly, her long fingers surprisingly nimble despite the claws. Her mind was sharp, grasping concepts that took human apprentices weeks to understand. Your people built ships once, Jake said. Warships that traveled between stars. That knowledge is still in you somewhere. The Empire forced us to specialize, Sarah replied. Warriors fought. Engineers built. Farmers grew food. When the Empire fell, we lost those who knew how to create. Only warriors remained, and warriors cannot eat pride. Then we'll teach you to be engineers again. Crix, the oldest of the children, joined them after a few days. He was maybe 8 years old in human terms, big for his age and intensely curious. Jake showed him how to strip wires and connect circuits. The young Draken made mistakes at first, his claws too sharp and his movements too forceful. But he learned quickly, adapting his technique. Smaller movements, Jake instructed. The electronics are delicate. You have to be gentle. Crix concentrated, his tongue sticking out slightly as he worked. It reminded Jake so much of his own daughter at that age that he had to smile. Ryan took over teaching Sarah about electrical systems, how the mining camp generated power, how it was distributed, how to diagnose problems. Lisa taught her basic first aid, showing her which human medicines worked on Draken biology and which were dangerous. Ben Hayes, the geologist who had been skeptical at first, became one of the strongest supporters. He taught Sarah and Crix how to read planetary surveys, how to identify warm zones using orbital scans, how to detect geothermal activity. Every planet has heat at its core, Ben explained. Even this frozen rock. The trick is finding where that heat gets closest to the surface and tapping into it. 2 weeks passed. The Draken family grew stronger. Mira and Finn, the younger children, helped in smaller ways. They learned to sort components, to clean tools, to organize the workshop. They were still children, playful and sometimes mischievous, but they worked hard to contribute. The mining crew grew used to their presence. Some workers even began to enjoy having them around. The Draken asked questions constantly, wanting to understand everything. Their perspective was different, alien, and sometimes they saw solutions to problems that had stumped the humans. Then Jake decided it was time for the big lesson, the one that would change everything. He took Sarah and Crix to the geothermal drilling site, 5 miles north of the main camp. This was where the mining operation's real work happened. Massive drills punched through the ice down through rock, reaching toward the planet's core where heat and pressure created valuable minerals. This is how humans conquered frozen worlds, Jake said. We don't fight the cold. We go around it, under it. We find the heat that exists everywhere and bring it to the surface. Sarah looked at the drilling equipment with wonder. You tap into the planet's blood. That's actually a good way to put it. See this pipe? It goes down 3 miles. At the bottom, the temperature is over 500 degrees. We pump water down, it comes back as steam, and we use that steam to generate power and heat. This technology could save my people, Sarah said quietly. Every frozen world could become a home. That's the idea. But there's more. Jake led them to a smaller drilling rig, one used for training new workers. I'm going to teach you how to operate this. How to find warm spots, how to drill safely, how to set up a thermal pump. By the time I'm done, you'll be able to do this yourself. Over the next week, Jake taught Sarah everything he knew about geothermal engineering. It was complex material, usually requiring months of training. But Sarah absorbed it like a sponge. Her mind was built for this kind of thinking, for understanding systems and solving problems. Crix learned too, his young brain flexible and quick. He couldn't operate the heavy equipment yet, but he understood the principles. Jake could see the boy's confidence growing each day. The breakthrough came when Jake showed them the thermal mapping software. It used satellite data and seismic readings to find underground heat sources. This is how we chose this location, Jake explained. We scanned the whole planet, found the spots where the crust is thinnest, where volcanic activity is closest to the surface. Sarah studied the display for a long moment. Then she pointed to a location about 50 miles east. There. That spot shows high thermal readings but no drilling activity. Why? Jake checked the data. The ice layer is too thick. It would take too much equipment to drill there. Not economically viable, but survivable. If someone had the equipment, they could tap into that heat? Yes, absolutely. It would be perfect for a small settlement. Maybe 50 to 100 people. Jake paused, realizing what Sarah was thinking. You're planning for others, aren't you? More Draken refugees. Word spreads among refugees, Sarah said. They will hear that a human gave shelter to a Draken family. Others will come hoping for the same mercy. I must be ready to help them, to teach them what you have taught me. Jake felt a swell of pride. This was exactly what he had hoped for. Not dependence, but independence. Not just saving one family, but creating a path for an entire people to survive. Then let's make sure you're ready. Ben, can you come here? The geologist joined them, and together they spent the afternoon showing Sarah how to conduct geological surveys, how to set up drilling sites, how to calculate the materials needed for a basic geothermal station. That evening, Lisa found Jake in his office. You realize what you've done, right? Taught some refugees useful skills? More than that. You've given them hope. I was talking with Sarah today. She told me that Draken refugees have been dying out because they saw no future. They gave up. But now with what you've taught her, she sees a path forward, not just for her family, but for her entire people. That's a lot of pressure to put on one woman and her kids. Maybe. But I've seen how fast they learn, how determined they are. If any group can come back from the edge of extinction, it's them. Especially with human help. Jake leaned back in his chair. The council isn't going to like this. When they find out there's going to be trouble, let them come. The crew is behind you now. All of them. Even the ones who were against it at first. They've seen what you're doing, and they believe in it. The next morning, Jake took Sarah to the highest point near the camp. From there, they could see the entire mining operation. Smoke rose from the thermal vents. Lights glowed from the residential pods. The drilling rigs worked steadily, pulling minerals from deep below. This is what determination looks like, Jake said. 3 years ago, this was empty ice. Now it's a functioning base with 40 humans living and working. We did this in one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. Because humans refuse to surrender, Sarah said. Exactly. And that's what I'm teaching you. Not just how to drill or how to read thermal maps. I'm teaching you to be stubborn. To look at an impossible situation and say, I'm going to make this work anyway. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The Draken Empire taught us to take what we wanted. You teach us to build what we need. This is a better way. It's the only way that lasts. Conquest is temporary. But if you teach someone to solve their own problems, to create their own future, that's permanent. That's real strength. A call came through on Jake's comm unit. It was Ryan, and his voice was tense. "Boss, we've got a problem. A Galactic Council ship just entered orbit. They're sending down an inspection team. They'll be here in 2 days." Jake's stomach dropped. He looked at Sarah, whose expression had gone carefully neutral. "Did they say what kind of inspection?" "Routine compliance check. But Jake, if they find the Draken family, we're done." "All of us." Jake took a deep breath. "Understood. I'll be right there." He ended the call and turned to Sarah. "You heard? Yes, you should send us away. Take us to a cave somewhere they won't find us. You have risked enough." "No, I'm done hiding." Jake's jaw set in determination. "We're going to face this head on, and we're going to win, because I've got a plan, and it's going to change everything." Jake spent the next 48 hours preparing. He wasn't going to hide the Draken family. He wasn't going to apologize. Instead, he was going to do something that would either save everything or destroy it all. He filled out forms. Dozens of them. Human bureaucracy was legendary across the galaxy, and Jake was about to use that to his advantage. Every form he completed was technically legal. Every box checked according to the rules. He just happened to be using rules that had never been applied in quite this way before. Ryan came into his office late on the first night. "What are you doing, boss?" "Fighting a war with paperwork," Jake replied without looking up from his screen. "The council wants to use laws against us? Fine, I'll use laws right back. I don't understand." "You will. Trust me." "How is Sarah?" "Calm, surprisingly calm. She's teaching Crix how to repair the heating system. Said if she's going to be taken away, she wants to make sure her son knows how to survive." Jake's chest tightened. "She's not getting taken anywhere. Not if I can help it." The council ship landed exactly on schedule. It was a sleek diplomatic vessel carrying the official seal of the Galactic Council. From it emerged 6 beings led by a Valorian named Thex. Valorians were tall, thin humanoids with blue skin and no hair. They were known throughout the galaxy for their strict adherence to rules and procedures. Jake met them at the landing pad with Ryan and Lisa. The rest of the crew watched from a distance. "Foreman Morrison?" Thex's voice was precise, each word carefully pronounced. "That's me. Welcome to Arcturus Prime. I am Inspector Thex. We are here to conduct a routine compliance inspection of your facility. This includes verification that all Galactic Council regulations are being followed." "Of course. I've prepared all our documentation. Everything is in order." The inspection took most of the day. Thex and his team checked safety protocols, reviewed mining quotas, examined environmental impact reports. Everything was perfect. Jake had always run a tight operation, but Jake knew what was coming. One of Thex's security officers had been scanning constantly, checking for unauthorized life signs. It was only a matter of time. "Foreman Morrison," Thex said as the sun began to set, "my security officer reports unusual thermal signatures in Sector 7. Large reptilian life forms. Please explain." Here it was. The moment everything would be decided. "They're Draken refugees. A mother and 3 children. I found them dying from exposure 3 weeks ago. I gave them shelter." The temperature seemed to drop. Thex's blue face became even more rigid. "You are aware that providing aid to Draken refugees is strictly prohibited by Council law?" "I am aware of the Council's position, yes." "Then you admit to deliberately violating Galactic Council Regulation 447, subsection 12? "I admit to saving lives. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty. This is not a matter for debate. The law is clear. Draken are classified as dangerous. They must be detained and relocated to approved containment facilities." "Containment facilities?" Jake's voice went hard. "You mean the ice moons where you dump refugees to die slowly?" "I've read the reports, Thex. Only 30% of Draken sent to those facilities survive more than a year. That is not my concern. I enforce the law, not question it." "Well, that's where we differ, because I think laws that kill children need to be questioned. Your opinion is irrelevant. The Draken will be taken into custody immediately. You and your crew will face charges for harboring dangerous aliens." "I don't think so." Jake pulled out his tablet and handed it to Thex. "You might want to read this first." Thex looked at the screen, his expression unchanging. But Jake saw his eyes widen slightly as he scrolled through the documents. "This is..." Thex paused. "Unexpected." "What is it?" one of the other inspectors asked. "Foreman Morrison has filed emergency asylum claims for the Draken under Earth colonial law, Section 293. This law allows frontier commanders to grant temporary refuge to refugees in life-threatening situations. But that law hasn't been used in 50 years, the inspector protested. Unused does not mean invalid, Jake said. The law is still on the books. I invoked it properly and filed all necessary documentation with Earth Command. They approved it. Thex looked up from the tablet. This is a manipulation of legal frameworks. No, it's following the rules. Your rules. You want everything by the book? Fine. This is by the book. Temporary asylum does not grant permanent residence. The Draken will still need to leave once the emergency period expires. True. Which is why I've also filed employment contracts for all 4 of them. They're now registered workers at this facility. Under Earth law, employed aliens have certain protected rights. They cannot possibly be qualified workers. They have no training. Actually, they do. Over the past 3 weeks, Sarah and Crix have completed basic training in thermal engineering, electrical systems, and geological survey techniques. I have their test scores and certification documentation right here. Both passed with excellent marks. Jake pulled up another file on the tablet. It showed detailed training logs, test results, and supervisor evaluations. All legitimate. All properly documented. Thex's expression was still neutral, but Jake could sense frustration beneath the calm exterior. This is highly irregular, but legal. That's the important part. The Council will challenge this. You cannot simply hire Draken and expect us to accept it. Maybe. But that challenge will take months, maybe years, to work through the courts. In the meantime, my workers are protected by Earth law, and I've already contacted other human colony foremen. 15 of them are willing to offer similar asylum and employment to Draken refugees. That number is growing. Now Thex looked genuinely alarmed. You are orchestrating a systematic violation of Council policy. I'm orchestrating a humanitarian relief effort using perfectly legal methods. There's a difference. I will not allow this. The Draken are dangerous. They cannot be trusted. Then meet them yourself before you judge. Jake activated his comm. Sarah, can you and the kids come to the landing pad? A few minutes later, Sarah arrived with Crix, Mira, and Finn. The mother walked with confidence now, her injuries healed. The children stayed close to her but looked around with curious eyes. Thex and his team stepped back instinctively. But Sarah made no aggressive moves. She simply stood calmly and spoke through her translator. I am Sarah. These are my children. We mean no harm to anyone. We simply wish to live. You are Draken, Thex said. Your people have a history of violence and conquest. My people have a history, yes. A history we are ashamed of. But I am not my ancestors. My children are not warriors. They are simply children who deserve a chance to grow up. Crick stepped forward, holding something in his claws. It was a small circuit board carefully assembled. I made this. Jake Morrison taught me. It's a thermal regulator for life support systems. I can make the diagram better with more practice. Thex stared at the circuit board. You trained them in advanced technology? Of course, Jake said. They're intelligent beings. They learn fast. Sarah can operate our drilling equipment. She can read thermal surveys. She understands geothermal engineering better than some of my human workers. Why wouldn't I train them? Because it is dangerous to give such knowledge to Draken. Why? Because they might use it to survive? To build homes? To become self-sufficient? That's exactly what I want them to do. Lisa stepped forward. Inspector Thex, I've worked with this family for 3 weeks. I've treated their injuries, taught them first aid, spent hours talking with them. They're not dangerous. They're refugees trying to survive. If you can't see that, then you're choosing not to look. Thex was silent for a long moment. Around them, Jake's entire crew had gathered. 40 humans standing together, united in their support. This situation is unprecedented, Thex finally said. I must consult with my superiors before making a final decision. Take your time, Jake said. But while you're consulting, understand this. We're not backing down. These Draken are under our protection. If you want to take them, you'll have to go through all of us. The crew murmured agreement. Even the workers who had initially opposed helping the Draken now stood firm. Thex looked at the assembled humans, then at the Draken family, then back at Jake. You are forcing the Council into a difficult position. Good. Because the Council's current position is causing people to die. Sometimes difficult positions are necessary for change to happen. I will return to my ship and contact my superiors. We will have an answer by morning. Thex turned and walked away, his team following. When they were gone, Sarah approached Jake. You have made powerful enemies today. Maybe. But I've also made the council think. That's a start. What happens now? Now we wait. And we hope that somewhere in that bureaucracy, there are people who care more about doing what's right than following old rules. That night, nobody slept much. Jake sat in his office, staring at reports he couldn't focus on. Lisa sat with Sarah and the children. Ryan organized the crew, making sure everyone was ready for whatever came next. As dawn broke over the frozen landscape, Thex's ship remained in orbit. The inspector had not returned. Hours passed with no word. The tension in the camp was thick enough to cut. Finally, at noon, Jake's comm unit activated. It was a message from Earth Command, forwarded through Thex's ship. Jake opened it with shaking hands and read the words that would change everything. The message was from Admiral Patricia Collins, head of Earth Colonial Operations. Jake had never met her, but her reputation was legendary. She had built humanity's presence in deep space from nothing, fought against bureaucracy and alien suspicion to establish Earth as a major galactic power. Her message was brief and direct. Foreman Morrison, your actions have created a significant diplomatic situation. However, after reviewing your documentation and consulting with our legal team, we find that you have acted within the boundaries of Earth law. The Draken family under your protection are legal workers and residents of Arcturus Prime. Earth Command will support your position. Furthermore, we are formally proposing to the Galactic Council that human colonies be designated as sanctuary zones for Draken refugees. We believe your approach offers a practical solution to a humanitarian crisis. Stand firm. Collins out. Jake read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Earth was backing him, not just accepting what he had done, but expanding it into official policy. He called Thex immediately. Inspector, I've received communication from Earth Command. I think you should see it. Thex arrived an hour later, his blue face set in hard lines. He read the message without expression, then handed the tablet back to Jake. The Council is not pleased with Earth's position. I imagine not, but it's a legal position. You can't argue with that. The Council can argue with anything. Thex paused, and for the first time his rigid demeanor cracked slightly. But they are also pragmatic. The Draken refugee situation has been a growing problem for years. Thousands are dying on ice moons and prison planets. The cost of containing them grows every year, and they are becoming desperate, which makes them actually dangerous. So what's the Council's response? They are proposing a compromise, a trial program. Arcturus Prime will become the first official Draken sanctuary world. Other human colonies may volunteer to join. The Council will monitor these sanctuaries closely. If there are any incidents, any signs of Draken aggression or rule breaking, the program will be terminated immediately. And the Draken already here, Sarah and her family, they may stay. They are now legal residents under the trial program. But Morrison, understand this. You are now responsible not just for this family, but for every Draken who comes here. If this fails, it will set back refugee rights across the galaxy. The pressure on you will be immense. Jake looked out at the frozen landscape, then back at Thex. I can handle pressure. That's what humans do. I am beginning to understand that. Thex almost smiled, though it was hard to tell with Valorian features. Against my better judgment, I find myself hoping you succeed. Does that mean you're approving the program? I am recommending approval to the Council. The final decision will take several days, but I believe it will pass. Your species has a talent for forcing change through sheer stubborn persistence. We prefer to think of it as determination. Perhaps that is the same thing. After Thex left, Jake gathered everyone in the main common room. The crew, Sarah, and her children all waited to hear what would happen. We won, Jake said simply. The Council is approving a trial program. Arcturus Prime is officially becoming a Draken sanctuary world. The room erupted in cheers. The crew hugged each other. Lisa cried. Ryan actually laughed, something Jake had rarely heard. Sarah stood quietly, her golden eyes bright with emotion. I do not know how to thank you, Jake Morrison. You have given my children a future. You have given my entire people hope. Thank me by making this work. Teach other Draken what I taught you. Help them survive. Build something here that lasts. We will. I swear it, the next few months were busy. Word spread through the refugee networks quickly. Draken began arriving on Arcturus Prime in small groups. desperate and hoping for the mercy that Sarah's family had found. Jake and Sarah met each new group together. Jake provided the initial shelter and supplies. Sarah taught them what she had learned, passing on the knowledge of thermal engineering, drilling, survival skills. The Draken learned fast, their minds sharp and their determination fierce. The human crew expanded to help. Ryan taught electrical systems. Ben taught geological survey. Lisa provided medical care. Every human worker took on at least one Draken apprentice. Within 6 months, there were 40 Draken living on Arcturus Prime. They had built their own settlement 3 miles from the human camp. Using the geothermal techniques Jake had taught Sarah, smoke rose from their forges. Lights glowed from their heated homes. They were becoming self-sufficient. Crix had grown. He was Jake's personal apprentice now, learning advanced engineering. The young Draken had a gift for problem-solving, seeing solutions that others missed. He wanted to become a spacecraft engineer someday, to rebuild the ships his ancestors had once crafted. Mira and Finn attended the human camp's small school. They learned math and science alongside the few human children on the base. The kids played together during breaks, the differences in species mattering less than the shared experience of growing up in a harsh environment. Other human colonies began volunteering for the Sanctuary program. Ice worlds and harsh planets that humans had colonized became havens for Draken refugees. The program wasn't perfect. There were challenges, disagreements, cultural misunderstandings. But it worked. The Galactic Council watched closely, looking for any excuse to shut it down. But the incidents they feared never materialized. The Draken weren't warriors anymore. They were builders, grateful for a chance to live rather than just survive. A year after finding Sarah and her family, Jake stood on the same ridge where he had first discovered their tracks. The landscape had changed. The human mining camp had expanded. The Draken settlement sprawled across the ice, buildings connected by heated tunnels. In the distance, new drilling rigs operated, staffed by mixed crews of humans and Draken working side by side. Sarah joined him on the ridge. She had become the unofficial leader of the Draken community, respected by both her people and the humans. "I often think about that day," Sarah said, "when I begged you for shelter expecting nothing, and I gave you fire instead. Yes, but it was more than heat. It was knowledge, hope, a future. You taught us that survival is not enough. We must build. We must create. We must contribute. That's the human way. We're stubborn like that." "It is a good kind of stubborn." Sarah looked at the settlements below. 40 Draken live here now. 50 more are waiting for transport from other worlds. They hear the stories. They know a human Foreman gave one family a chance, and that chance became a new beginning for our entire species. "How are your kids?" "Thriving. Crix is designing his first spacecraft component. Mira wants to be a doctor like Lisa. Finn is too young to know yet, but he loves working with the drilling equipment. You must be proud." "I am. But more than that, I am grateful. You could have left us to die. Most would have. But you chose differently." Jake thought about that day in the cave, the choice he had made. It had seemed simple at the time, just basic human decency. But it had changed everything. "I've been thinking about something," Jake said. "The Council is still nervous about this program. They want proof that it's sustainable, that the Draken won't become dependent on human charity." "We will not," Sarah said firmly. "We are learning, building. Soon we will be fully self-sufficient." "I know. But I think we can do better than that. I think we can show the galaxy something amazing." "What do you have in mind?" Jake pulled out his tablet and showed Sarah the plans he had been working on. Her golden eyes widened as she scrolled through the designs. "A joint human-Draken engineering project," she whispered. "A new type of thermal station that could work on any ice world. Designed by both species together. Built by both species together. Something neither of us could create alone. If we can pull this off, it proves that cooperation works. That different species can create something better together than they could apart. This will take years. Good things usually do. But I think we can make it happen. Your people have the strength and the old knowledge. My people have the stubbornness and the new techniques. Together we'll build something that changes the galaxy." Sarah looked at Jake, then back at the settlements below. "When I was young, the Draken Empire taught us that strength meant domination. That power meant taking from others. We learned too late that this path leads only to destruction. And now I see a different kind of strength. The strength to help others. The strength to share knowledge. The strength to build rather than destroy. This is human strength, and it is more powerful than anything the Empire ever achieved. It's not just human strength anymore. It's ours. Both of ours. They stood together on the ridge as the sun set, painting the ice in shades of orange and pink. Below, lights began glowing in both settlements. Human and Draken workers finished their shifts, heading to their homes. Children, both species, played in the heated common areas. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, still problems to solve, but it was working. It was real, and it was growing. Jake had given one family fire on a frozen world. That fire had spread, warming not just their bodies but their spirits. And now that fire burned in 40 Draken hearts and soon in hundreds more, not the fire of conquest but the fire of creation, the fire of hope. That was the real gift, not shelter, not charity, but the knowledge and tools to forge their own destiny. That was what made humanity special in a galaxy of rigid rules and ancient fears. Humans looked at the impossible and said, "Let's try anyway." They looked at the downtrodden and said, "You can do better." They looked at old enemies and said, "That was then. This is now." And sometimes, just sometimes, that stubborn human optimism changed everything. Jake smiled and headed back down to the camp. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But now he wasn't doing it alone. He had partners, friends, a community of two species learning to build something new together. The frozen dragon family had begged for shelter. He had given them fire, and that fire, carefully tended and shared, was lighting up the galaxy one frozen world at a time. That was the human way. That was the future they were building together. And it was only the beginning.